Hi everybody, lovely to see you and welcome to my talk on how to overcome your stingers. And tonight I'm going to give you 20 ways to get out of your own way, to overcome self-sabotage, the things we throw in our way, to stop us moving forward. The inspiration for this talk came from watching the end of one of those police chase programmes on the television, which I don't normally watch at all. And at the end of it, the police threw one of these contraptions across the road called a stinger. And stingers are designed to stop the baddies in their tracks and make sure they can't make any progress. And that programme had come at the end of a conversation I'd had a few minutes ago with a friend of mine who was going through some changes at work and was putting up some barriers to what was going on. And it made me think, actually, what we all do in our lives is we put our own stingers up. We stop ourselves from moving forward. We self-sabotage. And that's what this talk is all about, how to overcome the tendency to self-sabotage that we all have. Why do we do it? Well, our brain is hardwired to protect us. Certain types of changes can trigger our fight or flight response. Our body's going to survival mode. We want to bury our head in the sand and pretend that changes aren't happening, or we get very negative and quite aggressive and we throw up reasons why change can't happen. That serves a very useful purpose in that it keeps us nice and safe. If nothing changes, then we stay where we are and we're in our little comfort zone. But of course, the downside to that is that you can end up living a life that you didn't really want. You can end up living with disappointment, upset, always wondering, I wonder if I'd done this, or what if, or I always wanted to. You can end up living a life with regrets. And obviously that's not the best kind of life to have. So if you want to live a happy, fulfilled life, making the most of yourself, you have to learn to get over those stingers and move them out of your own way. So tonight I'll be talking to you about making changes. Two types of changes. The type of changes you want to make yourself and the type of changes that other people impose on you. I'll also be telling you a story, and the story is my own story. And I'll start in 1992. 1992 was the beginning of a 2-year period for me when just about everything that could possibly go wrong in my life went wrong. I'd just started a new job as a teacher. A few months later, my mum died. A few weeks later, I found out I was pregnant with my son. At the end of the year, I had my son, and within about a month, it was very obvious I was soon going to become a single parent. And when my son was 6 months old, I moved out of the marital home and set up life as a single mum. Not an easy time by anybody's stretch of the imagination, and it all came at me at once. But fast forward 9 years later to 2002, and I made another set of decisions. This time, they were much more within my own grasp and a set of decisions that positively impacted on my life. And I've been a single mum, my son was 9 at that point, and I decided that there must be more to life than I currently had, so I applied for a job overseas, put some of our stuff into storage, the rest on a ship bound for the Far East, and my son and I sailed across to live the other side of the world. To change our fortunes, and we had the time of our lives. We moved back last summer. So along with the 20 tips, I'm going to share little insights about how I coped with 2 sets of really quite major changes, not all nice, not all changes instigated by myself. So the first thing you need to realise is, if you want to change your life and you want to get out of your own way and make things move forward for you, you need to change your attitude. You need to think of change as positive and helpful and something to be embraced rather than something that's negative and not to be enjoyed. When I was sitting in my little house just outside Stoke-on-Trent, I spent 2 years kind of wallowing in self-pity. I was pretty miserable and quite self-indulgent. I felt very, very sorry for myself. Until one day, I decided really that I was quite fed up with feeling fed up and that it was time to do something about it. You have to be kind to yourself. There is a process involved in change, and psychologists recognise different steps along that way. And part of it for me was recognising actually it was okay to feel fed up. You know, I'd been dumped on from a great height and life wasn't and hadn't been very good. So it was all right to feel upset, all right to feel miserable, but what wasn't all right for me was to stay in that place. So after a couple of years, wallowing in misery and self-pity, I decided, right, enough is enough. And I knew that I had to change my attitude. And one of the ways that I did that was by understanding that if nothing changes, then nothing changes. There's a lovely quote by Mark Twain: if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And sitting on my backside in Stoke-on-Trent, I was just getting more of the same. I'd set up my life so that it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. I felt miserable, everything in my life was geared towards keeping me miserable, and I knew at that point that if I didn't change, nothing else in my life was going to change, and that change solely was down to me. I was the person in control. I was the only person that actually could make those changes happen. One of the things that occurred to me at that time was to sit and really take stock of my life and sit and realise actually what I've gone through. One way of getting yourself out of your own way is to look back at all the changes that you've been through in your life from the year dot. The jobs you've changed, the friendships you've made along the way, house changes, changes in direction, career changes, relationship changes, sadly the death of close ones. They all make us the person we are. And at that point in my life I realised how, despite the awfulness of some of the changes, actually I was still alive, I was still standing, I was still breathing, and I could still go on. Take control. I think this is very important, particularly if you are facing external changes that aren't necessarily inside your own sphere of control. If there are changes at work, if you're facing forced redundancy, if you've got relationship changes, and you feel that actually you don't have much control over those, grab the remote control of your own life, find your own voice and have your input. You may not feel you've got necessarily much to say, but find something to say. Go away, think about it. I always remember a lovely quote I read about running a meeting, and it said, one way to make an impact in a meeting is to say something very early on, even if it's open the window. And if people are trying to force changes upon you, find your voice, take control and press that remote control and switch it to a channel that you want. It's amazing how much that will make you feel in control and take away that feeling of powerlessness which causes us to be scared, and is another one of those reasons why we throw stingers in our paths in the first place, is because we're frightened of the things that might happen. Reframe a situation. Find a different way of looking at it. Sometimes it's very, very easy to get caught up in a negative cycle of events and only see things through jaded eyes and only be able to see the bad things about a situation. But, you know, if you can learn to look at things from a different point of view, for example, if you're going through a period of redundancy, it can be a chance to actually change something about your life that you don't want, a chance to start all over again. I have a friend who is in the process of possible redundancy, and for her it's great because actually it's the ideal opportunity. She can use the redundancy money to start up her own business. So make sure that you see the positives in the situation rather than the negatives. Routines. Sometimes changes in our routines, for example changes at work, can be unwelcome. My husband and I recently moved back to the UK, and he's got a job that involves extremely early mornings, and I'm not a morning person at all. But I have to get up with him a couple of times a week if I want the car. So I've learned that I will make that time work for me. I get up very early, go with him to work, come back with the car. But it's amazing when you're up at 5 in the morning, how many hours there are still left in the day. And you know, I use it to my advantage. I do my work paperwork, I set up my tweets for the day, I have nosy online, I read the blogs that I love to read, I put the washing on. Take advantage of it and make it work for you. And if it means the other end of the day I have to go to bed a little bit earlier than I normally would, well, that's what I do. But the fact is, in order to grab the most from that opportunity, I've learned to look at it in a different way and make it work for myself.